Special Operations Training Detachment, SOD West, Burro Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm your host, Captain Connor Mang, an observer coach trainer for Special Operations at the National Training Center. How's it going, everyone? This is Captain Connor Mang, a observer coach trainer for civil affairs at the National Training Center, Fort Irwin, California. Today we have the great opportunity to talk to a Burro alumni via Zoom, Captain Weston Rich. And if I could have you go ahead and introduce yourself, give us a little background on your experience here at Burro Team, where you're at now in your career, and kind of how you came to the Burro Team.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, Connor. Weston Rich, I'm husband, and I got two great stepkids. Also been in the Army for 11 years and first infantry, then went special forces and did my special forces detachment time at first group prior to going to the National Training Center and joining the Burro detachment. That kind of was, hey, somebody's getting put on this marketplace thing, and I was the guy that ended up being in that. And it was a blessing in disguise because I got down to NTC and worked with the best people that I've probably ever worked with in my entire Army career on the Burro detachment. And I got to see a lot of exposure of how not only special forces, but civil affairs and psychological operations, how they operate, how we operate together, and how we operate with the conventional force. So it was a really eye-opening experience, and I really enjoyed it. I was an observer coach trainer for about a year, just a little over a year. And then I was a plans officer for the second year that I spent at the National Training Center. And while that wasn't as hands-on, that was also rewarding, just getting to see the behind the scenes, like how you actually shape the scenario and how much buy-in units can have in what their rotation looks like, versus when I was a infantry officer, just going to JRTC. Hey, we got a JRTC, this month of the year, you do your home station training, but you're like, I don't really know what it's going to be like. And you show up and you do it. Whereas SOF units can actually make sure their METs are baked into the scenario, and they can get a lot of things accomplished, as well as the collective training at the company level and with the conventional force. Now I've PCS'd, and I'm actually part of the Artificial Intelligence Scholars Program, which you can find in the Broadening Opportunities catalog. It's part of Army Futures Command, but it's open to any branch if you so choose to want to come to a master's program in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon University. I highly encourage you to apply. I'm just starting out, so I can't speak very much on what the program actually entails, but it is related to data science, analytics, artificial intelligence, and I'm going to learn over the next 2 years what all those things actually mean. And then bring that back to the force, because the plan is after this, I'll be a field grade officer, and I'll be returning to the Special Forces Regiment to do my key development time, and hopefully bring the skill sets that I've learned at grad school along with me and better the force in that way, and then bring the tools and the skills that I learned as an observer coach trainer as well. So that's long-winded, but there you go.
No, that's a great rundown for people who have listened to Off the Radar in the past. You probably recognize Wes's voice. He was our old host. He's done a lot for this podcast, getting it off the ground, him and Micah. Talk to me a little bit about your initial kind of desire or plan for Off the Radar as to where it is now. I know when you came here, we talked earlier before I kind of came on board that this was your project to kind of maybe inform the masses of SOF before they come out here. Kind of walk us through what was your background in podcasting, if anything, and what was kind of your intent for creating this?
I'll start with the background. I had none, zero background in anything related to podcasting, audio production, or even talking into a microphone. I'd never really done it before. I wanted to take the lessons that I was going to learn as an OCT and help distill those and send that out into a more palatable way for the force to use. And I thought to myself, like, when I got the job as an observer coach trainer, before I arrived, I thought, what would I do to prepare myself, prepare my detachment for a rotation at one of the combat training centers? And knowing myself, I wasn't going to dig through a bunch of AARs, and I probably wasn't going to dig through a bunch of doctrine, and I would have forgotten to go to the group lesson learned and ask them for some assistance, but that's a great place to start. So I thought, I like podcasts. I like learning, and the good thing about podcasts, in my opinion, is you can put them on, you can exercise, you can clean your house, you can drive, you can listen to them while you're accomplishing something else. So it kind of feels like you're multitasking effectively. And I've always enjoyed listening to books and to music and stuff. So that part kind of just came naturally. So I looked around and I didn't find anything at all about special operations at the combat training centers. And I didn't really find anything about the combat training centers. But I guess the idea of a military podcast, I can thank my first operations officer at group for when he gave me my initial counseling. He gave me some professional development advice. And among that was, hey, here's some podcasts to listen to about military leadership. And at the time, they included Indigenous Approach by 1st Special Forces Command and the Softcast by by SOCOM. And yeah, so all that kind of together made me think, as I was about to move to NTC and be an observer coach trainer, like, I think that would be a really easy, palatable way for the force to learn about what rotations are and how to prepare for them. And fortunately, when I got here, after some time, I met Micah Pop, who had all the skill set and equipment to make it a possibility. And there was a lot of leadership that was supportive and let us, run with it and try to make it happen. And we did. So that's the genesis of Off the Radar.
That's awesome, man. I'm super thankful to be a part of it. I appreciate all the mentorship you've given me kind of as we've transitioned this. I was wondering, me and Micah were talking about kind of, where do you see this going? I know it's in a weird spot now where it's developing as we're developing out here at Burro Team. Where do you think, where if like perfect optimal conditions, where would you like to see this go as a product? I mean, is this something that we want to keep just at the NTC level? Is this expanded maybe potentially to other locations where SOF is training? Where do you think? And I know that's kind of hard to answer right now, but just curious, kind of your opinion on that.
The majority of the episodes we recorded were focused at the National Training Center because that's where Micah and I worked.
Mm-hmm.
However, it was explicitly supposed to be the Special Operations Training Detachment podcast, which is inclusive to the Joint Readiness Training Center and the National Training Center. And the goal was to focus on those two because that's where Special Operations Training Detachment has its footprint, with some overlap into the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Training Center. I might have rearranged some of those words. Yeah, because SOTD will cover down on Alaska and Hawaii when they have rotations, but it's so easy to do the National Training Center because we were sitting, on Fort Irwin 24/7. So that's where the huge majority of our focus was. I'd like to see it expand to include more commentary on JRTC. And we tried somewhat. We did, when I was an OCT, I did one rotation. I did that first group level rotation with 7th group out at JRTC. And that was a good eye-opening experience at the similarities and difference between the two training venues. And then talking with some of the role players that work at both, they've shared the similarities and differences on the episodes that we've had with them. And then behind the scenes, we worked with, well, and published an episode with Pineland Underground. But through that, behind the scenes, we had a connection that could be revisited with Special Warfare Journal and the Joint Readiness Multinational Center in Germany, because there are SOF operations that are trained on there with our NATO allies and such. So that would be another great venue to like get some feedback and pick people's brains on how they integrate, how they operate, and what they see. And that would probably be a very EUCOM focused environment, which is totally understandable. I mean, they're in Germany and they focus on EUCOM things. So holistically, and you could say like the White Sands missile range, the soft training that happens at Soft Tech there. But I would say the key thing is to keep it 80-90% focused on what SOTD provides to USASOC through the training venues, namely JRTC and NTC, and then auxiliary at Alaska and Hawaii. And then you could venture out 10 to 20% of the time and talk about other soft training if you get a good connection with JMRC or Soft Tech at Wismar or somebody else. But I think keeping it focused on SOTD training would be probably ideal. But if it grows to something else, that's totally fine, and I'm supportive and I'm happy. The other thing I'd say is, like, Pineland Underground has a rotation of hosts annually because people come into the Special Warfare Center in school and work there for a year or two, and then they PCS to somewhere else. I mean, Burro's got the same thing. So I'd just love it even if it stayed 90% focused on the National Training Center. You know, if we just have a new host every PCS season and just call it, hey, here's season 1, 2, 3, and whatever, because the base principles are fairly timeless, but we have new audience, new perspective, new, leaders as time moves forward. So I think new voices would be beneficial for that conversation to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that don't know, SOTD has just gone throughout the summer months, PCS season. We've done a major overhaul pretty much on all leadership positions, our 07, our 40 position of both incoming, as well as our op sergeant. We have pretty much full turnover on all the field teams with OCs. And like you said, Wes, that happens pretty much on a yearly basis. The NCOs seem to stay here a little longer, 2 to 3 years, and they get the continuity, and they build kind of the culture of Burro for what I've observed. And then the officers are really, they're here. It's very, lightning in a bottle. You get the experience and exposure to the RTU rotations while you're here, but then you're gone very quickly. It's a really cool dynamic, one that I haven't been a part of in my Army career. You touched on something that I wanted to kind of pick your brain. So Colonel Gonzalez, the new SOTD commander, came by during Foundations Week in July, and then he was actually here for the last rotation. And he said something which I think we all kind of understood, but hearing it from his mouth really concrete kind of solidified it with us, which was, here at SOTD, at NTC, our primary job is to train SOF to support Joint Force Maneuver, but we're not here to support PMT. Like, we're not here to support pre-mission training. We're not here to support specific METs that you want to get after. We're here to prepare for war. And I think that a lot of RTUs come through, and I'd be curious to see kind of what's your opinion. A lot of RTUs come and maybe don't understand that. They come here with the understanding that they're going to get to train very specific tasks, or this is kind of their open playground to do some more experimental things, which is definitely encouraged within what's doctrinally sound or doctrinally accepted and tactically sound. But did you, as an OC or in plans, kind of see the disconnect there, or could you shed some light on, a lot of RTUs, do they come here not understanding like this place's sole purpose is to prepare for war, not to get you ready for your SIFRI rotation to East Africa or a CEA or SIDET to go to UCOM. Like those are things that you guys do at your home stations. Those are things that you do at specific exercises that are geared towards those, like your Sage Eagles, your Tridents, your, things like that.
The short answer is yes. And there's content in earlier episodes that discuss kind of the pre-mission training versus what a CTC is supposed to be. But it is not a pre-mission training, in my opinion. At the tactical level, you have left and right limits where you can experiment on tactics, operations, and if you bring, gadgets and new technology, as long as you have somebody on your detachment, on your team that understands how to use that, you're not going to have a civilian, I'm blanking on the term, but you're not going to have a person from the company that made the product out there in the field with you showing you how to use it. You're going to have to be able to use whatever piece of kit that you brought if you want to try a new piece of kit. However, you can hit mission essential tasks while you're at a combat training center. And the first step of that, from my perspective, is in the planning phase when the rotational training unit is working with the plans team, because the plans team is the personnel that build the scenario to ensure that the special operations scenario is meshed with the conventional force scenario and it makes sense overall for the big picture of the conventional unit maneuver and the soft unit maneuver, and everything makes sense in our fake land, whatever scenario we're doing. But within that, there are a menu of options that the soft rotational training unit can pick from or request to have added, because we have a lot of realistic military training, and there's an individual that works, a contractor that works in the plans office that handles all that, and he does a phenomenal job setting up whatever kind of realistic military training somebody wants, whether it's an infill mechanism, whether it's having a target somewhere outside of the National Training Center footprint. I mean, we have lots of land that we've used across multiple rotations for special reconnaissance, for civil reconnaissance, for direct action, for anything that a special operations force of the three tribes could use, and integrating cyber and space as well. But the first big thing is typically it's a SF company with added civil affairs and psychological operations soldiers to it. They need to be participating in all the planning. So if they get on board like 270 days prior, they can then have the most influence over how their training objectives are met while the scenario is crafted to meet the scenario, because soft plans works alongside the planners for JRTC and NTC, whichever venue you're at, and they take the USASOC command guidance and the G3 guidance, and they bake that into the scenario. So, SF company, whatever, has XYZ METs they want to do. Well, the USASOC commander has ABC training objectives that soft plans is going to ensure they do. And when there's freedom and communication, like time in the scenario, freedom wise, and then there's communication beforehand, then the soft planners can take XYZ METs and put them into the scenario. So it's not a PMT in the sense that the observer coach trainers are evaluating you as a go or no go. And it's not a PMT in the sense that you're going to get recocked and you're going to, I'm going to do bay planning, go out and do my short range mission of 12 to 24 hours, and then go out and do another mission, because the scenario is 10 to 14 days, constant throughout, ever evolving with a live free thinking enemy. And you're going to have to react to the scenario as it develops. we have in the past, and I don't know if SOTD leadership has changed this, have told rotational training units, like, if you want to validate your unit, you can by providing additional people from your unit to be validators. So hypothetically, third group is going out to the National Training Center. They have to then send people to validate that company or those detachments. The OCTs that work at Burro Team won't be validating them, but they will be observing, providing feedback through in-role and out-of-role coaching and mentorship, as well as our retired SOF personnel that act as role players that in the scenario, are various things: host nation military, NGOs, host nation government, and whatever other things they want to be cast as in the scenario design. So long-winded answer. It can be used to hit mission training objectives, mission essential tasks, but it is not a pre-mission training. Like, we leave that to battalions and groups to conduct at home station or wherever they so choose to, if they want to go to Wismer to do it or something, because the goal or the reason for combat training that SOF is involved in combat training centers is to ensure that SOF units are meeting those USASOC command training objectives and integrating with the conventional force.
Yeah, it's spot on with kind of what we're the identity and culture here at SOTD is, we're here to serve that OCT role. A lot of people come here, I don't think they realize that there's no E in that OCT. There's no evaluation. And you are spot on. This upcoming rotation, we have units that are coming and providing outside personnel to support evaluation. And this is a good venue for that, I think, because you're going to get a lot of left and right limits, like you said, or a lot of leeway to have freedom, like you said, free thinking enemy. And it's just a lot of units I know use this kind of as their culminating exercise in their validation. However, we do not provide that. And I think there's some, I didn't know that prior to coming out here. I really thought OCs served as evaluators as well as safety and coaching and mentorship. But it's a different dynamic whenever you remove that and say, hey, I'm not here to evaluate you. I'm not giving you a yes or no. I'm not rolling down TE nos and giving you checks or minuses. I'm not here. That's not what I'm here for. We're really here as a professional development tool for you guys to make sure you get the most out of the scenario. And like you said, you're treating it like a LISCO fight and not a PMT exercise. So I think you're spot on with that, man.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely agree with you. Like, before getting there and working at Burro, that was my kind of expectation or thought, that like what OCTs did. And that, I think comes from conventional Army experience, because they're not called evaluators, but there is some like feeling of that. Back when I was in the infantry, it was like, well, if we don't perform well at JRTC, we're never going to deploy. We're never going to get rated to go to deploy. But it's definitely not like that at SOTD when you're at JRTC or NTC. And the OCTs are there to give you an outside perspective, and they're there to encourage you. If you want to try something, try something. And the last thing I'll say on like why it's not a pre-mission training is, while you may have specific missions where you go do direct action, you may do advise and assist, or you may do special reconnaissance or something of the like, it's not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to do any specific MET, because the scenario is going to develop. They're going to have, Connor, as a observer coach trainer, like before the rotation, we sit down and we get a brief on, okay, this is how we think the scenario is going to go, but the enemy, Black Horse, gets a vote, the SOF RTU gets a vote, and the conventional RTU gets a vote. And if they don't all act in the way that we're anticipating, then things get changed, and they get changed on a daily basis. Like, the number of times where I thought my detachment that I was observing was going to hit a specific target, and then it changed hours beforehand because the AOB commander was getting the intel and making decisions and decided, team one instead of team two is going to do this and we thought, okay, for whatever reason, I was observing a team and they were, closer on the battle space, but the AOB commander gave it to the other team for some reason. And that's their prerogative. That's one of the beauties of a combat training center is they're making decisions that have second and third order effects, and they get to see that play out in real time across the 10 to 14 days of the rotation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the best parts about Burro Team from my short time here is as a SOF officer or an NCO, the exposure you're going to get to that, like you just kind of alluded to, that constant change in plan. It really nests within the LISCO kind of mantra that we're pushing here. And I'm seeing it more. We just finished rotation a couple weeks ago. I'm seeing it more. And obviously being here, you're going to get exposed to it. But like getting out of that GWAT mindset that everybody keeps saying, get out of the GWAT mindset. This isn't GWAT. And it's really eye-opening to see when you watch rotations, like how much freedom and sometimes the restrictions and restraints that you have as a unit actually provide freedom for you really come out if you're able to like explain and use commander's intent. Perfect example is watching like an AOB commander telling ODAs, like you just said, hey, yes, this is your next 24, or this is what I'm tasking you to do with, but there's a very good chance within 24 hours when we hit our next comms window, it could completely change. And it may be one or two sentences based on an intel update that you never will see. And hey, you've been repurposed from a direct action mission to pushing into a special recon mission. And it's really cool to watch units, even though they struggle with that ambiguity. We were talking about it before we started. SOF has a lot of ambiguity, and we like to operate in that gray. And here it gets highlighted so perfectly when we send cats and SIDETs and ODAs out and say, okay, you have left and right limits, commander's intent. You have to understand, what assets are available to you, and then most importantly, like what is your purpose out there? If it's not supporting that joint force maneuver, then you probably need to ask yourself, like, do I need to be shooting this javelin at this tank, or do I need to be driving across the box to go meet with this guy to get a cell phone, or maybe introduce myself to a network? Like all these things that we're now seeing NTC really, really get highlighted, really get exposed in our planning prior to coming out here and then during execution. So talking about, you had mentioned earlier kind of the planning process and kind of where success starts is before the rotation, before the R2 gets here. When I talked to Goldminer 07 and 40, they really emphasize the importance of LTP, the Leaders Training Program. What is your opinion on that? I think we both can agree it's important, but as a SOF, as somebody on the SOF side, for those that are listening that are getting ready to come in the next 6 months or kind of in their LTP window, what advice can you give them as far as who should be coming? Is it just your key leaders? Is it enablers? Is it people that, if you're coming and you're on the guard side, I know that's also a different dynamic for people that aren't Compo 1. Kind of give me your opinion on LTP and how vital is that for success here at NTC?
Fantastic question. So LTP, or Leadership Training Program, hugely important. I know that many people probably don't think that. I know leadership definitely pushes for it. So it is very valuable for a lot of reasons. Maybe because I ran into one person on the tactical side, at the detachment team level that thought it was, well, I've done military decision-making process plenty of times. Why do I need to practice again? Like, yeah, they do military decision-making process a whole 96-hour cycle during leadership training program, but that's a vehicle to get integration of that conventional force staff and the special operations forces So if there's nobody from SOF there, you're missing a huge opportunity to integrate with the unit that you're going to work with. And I would say that includes the enablers, namely civil affairs and psychological operations, that may not know anyone in the SF company that they're going to work with during the rotation. So get on board early, meet them. Hopefully you meet them before LTP, but if you get to LTP and have to meet this SF company and the conventional forces, that's fine. But yeah, it's very important. It happens 90 to 180 days before the rotation. I don't remember exactly. I think typically more on the 120 to 180 days before the rotation is when LTP happens. Hugely important. And, who do you bring? Well, there's a lot of debate over that. It's probably more of a understanding capabilities and personalities than necessarily I have to bring this position, but you want to have warfighting functions there to integrate and people that are going to integrate with the conventional force. You also want people to have good understanding of special operations at the tactical level so that they can communicate that to the conventional brigade, because you're doing a staff exercise and doing a planning exercise that's similar to the first order of the actual rotation. So it could be, the command team would probably be a good place to start at the AOB, depending on how much integration, like, is the civil affairs team going to be doing operations? They're going to go out and do civil reconnaissance and network development and things away from the AOB. Are they going to be co-located with the AOB? What's the plan for them? But might be worthwhile to bring one of the civil affairs team members to LTP, and then same with PSYOP, if you're going to let them have the freedom that they really should have, and they're not just going to be stuck on the AOB staff doing staff things, but if they're going to be doing information operations, they should be knowing who's doing information operations on the brigade side. And those face-to-face interactions are hugely important. And then somebody that can do intelligence and somebody that can do communications, which, would be inside of mission command. And those would typically be from the AOB staff. So probably like the 18 Fox from the B team and maybe the 18 Echo or the 25 series or something to integrate with the conventional force. How are we going to have technical means to communicate? What are our non-technical means if we need those? Because we all know our systems don't talk, and they're probably going to use a SIPR tactical server that won't even go out and touch any real network. So your liaison element's going to have a tough time communicating digital products back to the AOB. And then obviously somebody from your liaison element, in my opinion, should go to leadership training program, because that element, whatever you use to put in that element, and there's debate over that as well, but that needs to be like somebody that's able to be a leader, whether that's a captain, a E7, E8, whoever you trust to be the representative of the AOB commander when the AOB commander is not present. And then you need the warfighting functions integrated on your liaison element as well, because a good liaison element is going to integrate with that brigade staff and be value added. They're going to share your common operating, common intelligence, civil affairs understanding of the environment. They're going to share all this information with the brigade, and they're going to receive the brigade's data and analysis and stuff, and they're going to be able to share that back to the AOB. So you got to pick good people for the liaison element as well. So ideally, somebody from the top 3 of the AOB, or more than that, maybe the commander and the sergeant major or the warrant, and then intel rep, commo rep, maybe somebody that understands sustainment. That's really big. And if somebody understands two things, that's great. But yeah, sustainment, and then your somebody from the liaison element. And then if you want to bring a CA or PSYOP element as well, like to LTP, that would be great. I know budget constraints and time constraints and things like that. So people have to be choosy. And then when it comes to your part with the National Guard, well, the National Guard has, or Army Reserves too, have personnel that are on active status, and they have the majority of their personnel that are not on active status. So, like the LTP for the last rotation, the National Guard rotation that recently happened at NTC, they had a captain, a warrant, and a couple NCOs come out, if memory serves, and they were all on active status. So it was a detachment commander, a team sergeant. I can't remember where the warrant actually worked inside of the company, but they represented, oh, we're the ops and we're the active folks for the guard unit, and we're the ones that are doing the bulk of the planning because our 9 to 5 regular job is Army while everyone else is doing civilian work. And during drills, they would do MDMP and planning to prepare for the rotation alongside of their actual like other training that they had to accomplish during drills. So I'm not really envious of that. That's a harder scenario when the Army is not your full-time job. But it's not easy when the Army is your full-time job because there's a lot of requirements going on. But LTP is important. Pick the best people you have available that you trust. And there's no better thing that you can do to get integrated with that unit that you're going to train with. Because right after I got to first group, not right after, but pretty soon, a couple months later, I went to a JPMRC rotation where I served as a SOF LNO to the 25th ID brigade that was going through the rotation. And I had gone to LTP with them. So I already knew the S3, I already knew all the staff primaries and a bunch of the secondaries. And when I got there on ground for rotation, I knew who to talk to about any issues that I had or any information that I needed to share. So it put me, days ahead of had I not gone to LTP, because I had the ability a week, months before to build relationships and to build trust, to show, hey, I can provide value to you guys through a planning exercise. So can't say enough. It's worth it. Go. That's what I got.
Yeah, there's so much in there. If we had the ability to get this out to everybody, I think that your answer really encompassed a lot of which you've covered in previous episodes. The liaison officer, for example, an LNO, I think, Wes did a great, I think a 2-part episode on LNOs. So if you get a chance, if you're listening, to go back and actually refer to that, there's a lot of valuable insight from an RTU and Wes's perspective on what an LNO should be doing and what makes a good LNO, and how that can really enhance an AOB or just a commander in general, enhance their ability to make decisions because of that connective tissue with the conventional force, and then how it actually trickles down to the ground force commanders, the ODAs, the CATs, and the SIDETs that are out there. We saw with this past rotation, the LNO that was picked was extremely competent. He was one of the individuals you were speaking of that was on AGR status. So he actually came to LTP, I believe, and then was selected as the LNO for the brigade. And we just saw that develop into a very fruitful relationship during the exercise. So a lot of times, communication was, I don't want to say wasn't stovepipe, because it wasn't in a negative sense, but it was funneled through that LNO from the AOB to straight to the brigade commander, because that trust was developed, I think, back even starting in LTP. And this unit was co-located geographically with their brigade combat team they came with, so that was added bonus. But for units that don't have that, I think that's another thing we haven't really touched on. But a lot of times when SOF units come here, you might have a first group ODA or an AOB, which is coming out of JBLM, and then you have a 97th company from Civil Affairs that's coming from Fort Bragg, and then your PsyOpers are also coming from Fort Bragg, so they don't have the opportunity to train together like that IBCT that's coming here. That's usually co-located. You know, a 1st Armor Division's coming here, and they're sending an ABCT or an MBCT now is what we call them. They're usually together at home station. They know each other's SOPs between their maneuver units, their BSB, their engineers. I think something that you touched on as well, a valuable LNO, and then also LTP provides that opportunity for units to actually reach out and start making network and connections with the conventional force to understand, like, hey, your enablers or what is your BSA going to consist of? You know, like, can you actually recover some of my vehicles that I'm bringing? You know, if I want to use JLTVs, and that's one of the tasks that we really want to get after as an ODA is to use JLTVs. Can your equipment at your mobility section, can they actually recover that? So that's where LTP, I think, for units that are listening, like that is another opportunity for you to start talking with the conventional force and understanding, like, hey, how many engineers are you bringing? What does an IBCT or what does an ABCT bring to the fight as far as, like, how many tanks are in your companies? How many tanks are in a platoon? How many rally fighting vehicles are you guys bringing? Things like you mentioned, like bringing your supply NCOs and bringing your commo guys, they'll get here and understand very quickly, like, the ankle biter things that I can solve now, so I don't have to spend calories and time during the rotation during RSNI. Like, am I getting pre-po vehicles, or what am I bringing? Am I getting, short-term rentals? That was something we had talked about at Burro Team just during this last rotation. I think LTP is an opportunity to solve a lot of problems, and obviously not everything will be solved and things will develop and new problems will arise when you get here during RSOI, but creating that network with your assigned conventional force, as well as, like you said, your CA and your PsyOpers, really sets the stage, I think, for success. This wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Captain Weston Rich. In part 2, Weston will continue to discuss his opinions on RSOF and LISCO, and we'll wrap up with his final thoughts on his time here at Burro Team. If you are interested in being a guest on the Off the Radar podcast or have a topic you'd like us to cover, please contact the Off the Radar team at offtheradarpodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where RSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform.